I have told this story maybe 40 times now. At the ferry yard, at my daughter's kitchen table, once to a man on a train who did not ask. And every time I get to the part where the guard moved, somebody stops me. They say, "Wait, he moved." Yes, he moved. And that is the part nobody believes until I tell them why. It was the second week of July. The hottest week Aldenmore had seen in 11 years, they said on the radio, though the radio says that every summer. I was 68, retired 2 years by then. 31 years I spent with my hands inside ferry engines, and the only thing I have to show for it is a bad hip and a granddaughter who thinks I know everything about the world. Her name is Nessa. She was 7 that summer, 7 and loud. She had been asking to see the palace guard since spring. Her whole class had gone on a trip in May, and she had missed it with a chest cold, and she had not let it go. Not for one day, so I said, "Fine, Tuesday. We go Tuesday." We took the number 4 tram in from the river side, and by the time we got off at the square, my shirt was already stuck to my back. The heat that day was not normal heat. It came up off the paving stones. You could feel it climbing your legs. Kesterly Palace sits at the top of the long avenue, and if you have never seen it, I will tell you it is smaller than you imagine and bigger than you can hold in your head at the same time. It does not try to impress you. It just sits there and lets you do the work. There were maybe 200 people at the front railing by 10 in the morning. Tourists mostly, cameras up. A tour guide with a yellow umbrella yelling in 3 languages. Somebody was selling ice from a cart and doing very well. And behind the railing in the sun stood the guards of the 9th Gate Company. Now, if you have not seen them, let me try. Gray tunic, not red, not the colors they put on postcards for the winter ceremony. In summer, the 9th wears gray, and the collar comes right up under the jaw, and there is a black leather strap under the chin that leaves a mark on a man's face at the end of his shift. They stand on a stone step about 20 centimeters up. That is all, 20 centimeters between them and the rest of us. And they do not move. I do not mean they move a little. I mean a pigeon can land on the barrel of the rifle, and that man's eye will not travel. Nessa stood at the railing with her hands wrapped around the iron, and she stared at the one nearest us for a long time. Then she looked up at me and whispered, "Granddad, is he real?" I said, "He's real." She said, "Prove it." I said, "You can't prove a thing like that. You just wait long enough and you'll see him blink." She waited 9 minutes. I timed it because I was bored. She never saw him blink. The one nearest us was young, 30 maybe, not more. He had a face like a door that has been painted shut, sunburn across the nose, a little scar under his left eye, an old one, faded white. I found out his name later, from the newspaper. Corporal Tomas Raid. And on the left side of his tunic, he had 3 medals. 3? That is not common. Most of the young ones have one, if that. Some have nothing but the company pin. 3 on a man that age gets noticed, and it got noticed that morning because I heard a man behind me in a linen jacket say to his wife, "That's a lot of hardware for a boy." His wife said something back. I did not catch it. But it was true, 3. And the middle one was odd, bronze, dull, plainer than the other 2. It did not match. It looked like it had come from a different life. I remember thinking that. I remember thinking that one's not from the same set. I had no idea. Around 11, the crowd thickened up. A coach party came in from somewhere, and suddenly the railing was 3 deep, and Nessa was getting elbowed. So I put her up on the low stone wall to my left and held her ankle so she would not go over. That is how I had a clear view, because I was standing where nobody wanted to stand. And that is when I noticed the boy. He was small, 10, 11. It is hard with hungry children, they read younger than they are. Gray jacket, too heavy for that weather, sleeves down over his hands, and he was working the railing, moving along it sideways, not looking at the palace once. Not once. Everybody at that railing was looking up. 200 faces tilted at the same angle, all of them pointed at those windows. He was looking at pockets. I have been around long enough to know a working child when I see one. I am not proud of what I did next, which is nothing. I thought, that is not my business. I thought, somebody will notice. I hate that I thought that, but I did. He lifted a phone off a woman in a straw hat. Clean. She never felt it. He was good, and being good at that at 11 years old means somebody taught him, and somebody teaching an 11-year-old that is a whole other story I do not want to think about. Then he got to the end of the railing, and instead of turning around, he ducked under it. The gasp went along the crowd like a wave. Because you do not go under the railing. That is the one thing. There is no sign, there does not need to be a sign. Everybody knows. And on the other side of the railing, that is the guard's ground. And there are rules about the guard's ground that are older than my grandfather. The boy stood up straight on the wrong side and looked around, and for 1 second his face was blank, like he had surprised himself, like his feet had gone before his head agreed. Then he looked at Corporal Reid, and he walked toward him. A woman near me said, "Oh no, oh no, no." The tour guide with the yellow umbrella stopped mid-sentence, just stopped. The umbrella came down. Somebody laughed the way people laugh when they are frightened. And Reid did not move. The boy came right up to him, right up, close enough that the guard could have counted his eyelashes. They stood like that. 100 phones came up, I heard them. That little sound they make, all at once, like insects. The boy reached out. Slow, testing. He touched the guard's sleeve with 2 fingers, the way you touch a fence you think might be electric. Nothing. He pressed harder. He pushed the guard's arm. He put his palm flat on the man's chest and shoved. Reid did not move a centimeter. He might as well have been the wall behind him. And I could see something happening in the boy's face. He was not laughing. He was not showing off for the crowd. He had that look children get when a thing does not obey the rules they know. He was confused. He was standing in front of a man who would not react to him, and I think, and this is me talking, an old man guessing, and you can take it or leave it, I think he had spent his whole life being reacted to, shouted at, grabbed, chased, and here was a man who would not. So he did the only thing he knew how to do. He reached for the medals. There is a noise a crowd makes that is not a word. That is what happened. 200 people made a noise that was not a word. His fingers closed on the middle one, the dull bronze one, the one that did not match. And he pulled. The ribbon tore. I heard it. Over the traffic on the avenue, over 200 people, I heard that little rip of cloth, and I will hear it for the rest of my life. The medal came away in his hand. And Corporal Tomas Reid did not move. Now, you need to understand what that means, standing there, because it is easy to say a man stood still. A boy had just torn a decoration off his chest in front of his palace, and his company and 200 strangers with cameras, and the man's orders said stand. So he stood. His jaw did something, that is all. A muscle went hard along the side of his face once. That was the entire reaction. The boy stared at the medal in his fist, then he stared up at the guard. And then he ran. He got maybe 8 meters. Because the crowd turned. I want to be careful how I say this, because I was in that crowd and I am not standing outside it. They turned like one animal. All the shock and the heat and the phones and the nothing happening of the last 3 hours turned over at once into something else. A man in a linen jacket got him by the collar and pulled him off his feet. The kid went down hard on the stones. Somebody's foot was on his back. Somebody had his wrist and was bending it to get the fist open, and he would not open it, and they bent harder. He started screaming. Not a tough scream, not a thief scream. He screamed like a child in a dentist's chair. And people were shouting "Little rat" and "Hold him" and "Get the police." And there were maybe 6 adults on top of an 11-year-old boy on the hot stones. And the phones were all still up, every single one, and not one of them was pointed at the palace anymore. Nessa said, "Granddad, why are they doing that?" And I did not have an answer. I have had 2 years to find one, and I still do not have it. That is when the ground shook. That is what it felt like, one boot. Corporal Reid had come off his step. I have thought about that sound more than anything else from that day. It was one boot on stone, and it went through 200 people and shut every one of them up. The crowd noise died like a switch. Because he was moving. He came off the step, and he came down the length of that ground at a march, full march, arms swinging, rifle up on the shoulder, and the crowd broke apart in front of him the way water goes around a hull. Somewhere up near the arch a voice roared, "REIDH." That was Sergeant Hallow. I read his name later, too. Raid did not stop. Here is where everybody who hears this story guesses wrong. They think he grabbed the boy. They think he hauled him up by the jacket or took his medal back or planted a knee on him. He did not. He went past the boy. He stepped over him with those long, polished boots, one leg then the other, and he turned around and he put himself between that child and the crowd. And he came to attention. The man in the linen jacket had his hand still out. He said, he stole your. Raid looked at him. That was it. He looked at him. And the man's hand went down and he stepped back into the crowd and he did not say another word, not one, and I watched his face go red all the way down into his collar. The foot came off the boy's back. The wrist got let go. Nobody had said anything. Nobody had been ordered. 6 grown adults just came off a child because one man stood in front of him and looked at them. The boy did not get up. He lay on his side on the hot stones with his arms over his head and cried, and it was the worst sound in the world. The medal was on the ground about half a meter from his hand. It had come open in the fall after all. Sergeant Hallow arrived. Big man, older, gray at the temples, and he was furious the way only a man responsible for other men can be furious. He said, "Corporal, you are off your post." And Raid said, "And this is the part I got word for word, because I was 6 meters away and there was not a sound in that square." He said, "Sergeant, I'm on it." Hallow looked past him, at the boy on the ground, at the crowd, at the phones. He was working something out. You could watch him do it. Then he did the thing I think about most, and it was nothing. He just moved his chin about 2 centimeters to one side. And Raid bent down. He went down on one knee next to that child, in front of everyone. He did not touch him, not once. He kept his hands where the boy could see them. He picked up the medal off the stones and he turned it over in his fingers and he looked at it for a second. Then he held it out, flat on his palm, down where a boy lying on the ground could see it. And he said quietly, but the square was so silent that it carried, "Do you know what this one's for?" The boy did not answer. He was still crying. Raid said, "It's not for fighting." He said, "There was a fire in Marnhill. Before I came here, 3rd floor, I went up twice." He said, "The second time was for a boy about your size." And then he said the thing. He said, "I did not go up those stairs so that 100 people could stand on him in the street." Nobody breathed. I mean that, 200 people, and I did not hear one person breathe. He put the medal in the boy's hand, closed his fingers over it, stood up. And he said loud to the crowd, the only time he raised his voice, "He's 11. 2 words after that, go home." Then he turned around and he marched back to his step, 22 paces. I counted them, God knows why, 22. He stepped up, rifle down, heels together. And he went back to being furniture. There was a torn place on his tunic where the ribbon had been, and a thread of it hanging loose and moving in a bit of wind that had finally come up. That was the only thing on him that moved for the rest of his shift. The police came about 4 minutes later, 2 of them walking, not running. They took the boy away, and he went quietly, and he still had the medal in his fist, and neither of them tried to take it off him. I found out later there was a woman in the crowd, a school teacher, who followed them to the station, and would not leave until somebody told her where that child was going to sleep that night. I do not know her name. I hope somebody does. The video went everywhere, of course. You have probably seen a piece of it. There are about 9 versions, and 8 of them cut off before he kneels, because the kneeling is not the part that gets shared. The tearing is the part that gets shared. The Ninth Gate Company never made a statement. They do not. There was an inquiry, apparently. Internal. A corporal leaving his post is not a small thing. It is possibly the biggest thing, and there were people who wanted him gone for it, and they were not stupid people. Rules are rules for reasons. If a guard comes off his step every time the crowd does something, the step means nothing. He was not dismissed. That is all anybody will say. I went back in September. He was there, same step, gray tunic. 2 medals. Nessa is 9 now. She does not remember most of it. She remembers the ice cart, and she remembers the boy screaming, which I would have taken from her if I could. But last winter she asked me, out of nowhere, doing her homework at the table, "Granddad, the guard man, Why did he give it to him? And I have had 2 years, and I still only have this. I said, love, he did not give away his medal. I said that is the only day he ever really wore it.